Keith on the line, Dad from Dad's Timeout, from Elevator Jones, Dan Soberberg on the line right now. Dan, how you doing?
I'm good. How are you guys doing?
Pretty good, pretty good. Thanks for joining us tonight. I know you and we met through Twitter, and
Yep.
there was a request for you to come onto the show, and number one, I always support with me, Dad myself. I always want to make an effort to get out there and support the other dads and dad bloggers that are out there. So, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you, and it's very much appreciated. Thanks for getting back to me on Twitter and helping me, do a little book promotion and talk a little bit about what my son and I worked on together.
Definitely. And I'm going to probably work with you behind the scenes because I definitely want to get a copy of Elevator Jones, but we'll get to that later on.
Yeah, we can definitely do that. Yep.
But I wanted to talk with you because, it's very exciting. You co-authored a children's book, the first of a series, the Elevator Jones series, with your 9-year-old son. So, got to ask you, how was that? How did you come about with that idea?
Well, it's funny. We a couple of years ago, I had been talking to my wife about how I wanted to write a children's book. I've been blogging for years on, fatherhood topics and sports and cars and, typical guy kind of stuff. And I had, we were taking a long car ride somewhere. I talked about how I wanted to write a children's book. And she was like, well, you should do it. And it was one of those things where it was sort of like, yeah, maybe one of these days I'll get to it. And finally, a couple of years went by. My kids got a little bit older. My son, was learning to read and getting interested in books himself. So I was like, all right, I'm going to do it. And I took a class in New York, one of the Gothic writing workshops on children's writing. Came home, wrote a story that had been sort of bouncing around in my head for a few years, and the kids loved it. And my son, who was probably 7.5 at the time, asked if we could write a book together. And I was like, yeah, that would be terrific. So it gave us an opportunity to work together, and it gave me a chance to, instead of just saying, hey, I'm going to write this children's story and that's the end of it, it made it into sort of a fun little hobby that we could work on together. So that's sort of how it started. Just sort of an innocent question from a first grader. Or he might have been at the start of second grade by that time. And he came up with a character name. He thought Elevator Jones was a good name for a character, and I said, I think there's a lot of things we could do with somebody named Elevator Jones, and we sort of crafted the story around the name of the character. So we knew the name of the character before we had any idea what it was that he was going to be doing.
Hey, Dan, I'm here. I'm sitting here talking to you, and I had the mute button on because I just wanted to make sure you came through as clear as possible. So I'm sorry about
that's okay. That. I want to make sure I didn't lose you.
Oh, yeah, no, you didn't lose me. So I got to tell you this. Before we, and totally get into the thought process for the book and everything else like this. So your dad of, how many kids do you have?
2 kids. I have a 9-year-old boy and a 6-year-old girl.
Okay, cool. So now your 6-year-old girl, maybe she's too young, because I'm going to say there has to be, with you writing a book or co-authoring a book with your son, what do you plan to do with your daughter?
Well, it's funny because her and I actually tonight we're working on her story. So after my son and I, wrote our book and we published it, she said she came to me on her own when she was only 5 at the time. Hadn't even started first grade, and she came to me and she said, "When are we going to write my book?"
Of course.
And as soon as you want to. When do you want to start? So that was really cool. As much fun as my son and I had working on our book and starting on the sequel to it now, having a 5-year-old come to you and tell you that
that's great.
She wanted to work on her book was really cool.
What is Mom's take about this? About watching you and your son bond together like this?
Well, she loves it. She's been supportive. We've been married for 12 years now, and she's always been very supportive of me. I'm very busy. Like, I'm always doing something. So if I'm not, I work full time, but then I'm like writing blogs and writing articles and teaching classes and developing classes and online courses, and I'm always doing something. So I think she thinks it's funny that I'm like busy all the time, but she's always very supportive. She was very proud of the work that we did together, and I think extremely proud of the way my son responded to having the book published. Because he was out there sort of promoting it. He was telling people, hey, we finished our book. You want to read the book? We've done a couple of book signings. So it's been sort of a way to, empower him and give him something that's his own. And he's also we've put some money to the side, some of the proceeds from the book, to donate to charity. And he chose a Children's Home of York. We live in York, Pennsylvania, and it's a local foster home. And so we've been in contact with them. In a few weeks, we're going to put together some duffel bags full of toiletries and journals and pens and pencils and some books, and take it to the kids some of the foster kids that don't have things of their own when they get placed in a new home. So that's something that came out of this too. So it gives him a chance to to be charitable. So everything it's all positive, and I think she's just proud. She's just proud of the work that we're doing, and she's extremely supportive of it.
That's excellent. That's excellent. As long as I tell you this much, there's no roadblocks you can run into when that foundation is set up at home, and you guys are supportive of each other, and she's supportive of your endeavors or initiatives that you're putting forward. And what's also key, what I've picked up from this conversation, is that you are also at the same time, your son, with him being 9, because my son is 8, and you're not starting, but you're teaching him some, core values of, hey, we're going to take, some of the proceeds and we're going to donate it here. And having his input on, hey, this is where we should, donate this to, because, some of these kids aren't as privileged as I am. You're doing definitely an excellent job with that. I guess my next question is, and for some reason, wives do find it funny when you're working, you're blogging, you're doing podcasts, you're doing this, you're doing that, and it's I guess for our end, it's never enough, because
right.
It really is never enough, because you're sitting there, and I look at a lot of this that we do is, I hate to put us in a box and call us dad bloggers, but we're really more about networking. We're really more about networking.
Yeah, that's a huge part of it.
So do you? I ask you this much: do you go to any dad blogger like conventions? Like, do you go to there's Dad Blogger 2.0 coming up? Dad 2.0 coming up.
Yeah, but I actually haven't in the past. I've thought about, I'm not terribly active on Twitter and Facebook. I post my stuff up there, but I don't I'm not as interactive probably as I should be, and I've looked at some of those things that haven't been spurred to action yet.
Okay, I mean that's fair. That's fair. So you mentioned you were blogging for years. How many years were you blogging for?
Let's see. Probably. Well, my daughter's 6. I'm 6.5 now. So just I think the first blog post I wrote was the night before she was born. So about 6.5 years, and that was mostly done, sort of out of a nervous energy. And my wife was 2 weeks past due with her. She was holding out for a natural birth after having a C-section with our son, and our daughter was not cooperating. And the doctor was like, "Look, we can't push this any longer. She's got to come out." And that was our first indication of our daughter's strong will and stubbornness.
Yes.
And I think just sort of out of a nervous energy, I started writing. I just wrote a blog that had nothing to do with what I was going through. It was a sports blog. It was I grew up a Baltimore Orioles fan, so it was a sports blog about something the Orioles did. It was the middle of August, and I fired off a blog and posted it to a local sports website that let fans post content, and that was really the first one I had done, and it was probably really the first thing I'd written in. I did a lot of writing during college and wrote a couple of screenplays shortly after college. It was probably the first thing I'd actually written in 10 years.
Okay.
And it sort of got back into me. It made me remember how much I enjoyed writing, how I used that as a stress reliever, and that's sort of how I got started back into doing that stuff. And 6 years later, still doing it. There's a website based out of Baltimore called Splice Today that I've written a sports column for twice a week for the past 5.5 years.
Wow.
And they're terrific. And they're terrific. They generally let me write whatever I want. And every now and then the editor might push me in one direction or another, but usually not. And when I say every now and then, I mean maybe 3 times in 5.5 years. He's said, "Hey, why don't you write something about this?" So that's been it. That was sort of a great relationship that I just sort of stumbled on, and that's sort of how I got started. And I think that the children's writing sort of came out of that.
Okay.
The blogging is fun. It's fun, but there isn't a whole lot of meaning behind writing an opinion piece about, a trade that went down 2 days ago or something. It can be fun, and it's certainly a stress reliever for myself. So personally, it's beneficial, but there isn't a whole lot of intrinsic value, or long-term value out of writing that sort of content. So I think that's when I started thinking about writing for children, because I knew that it could be more impactful, to get readers when they're young or before they're even readers. To try to get them interested in books and stories and creating their own stories and that sort of a thing.
I got to tell you, so I like to say this is the primary show I sit on, because I host it by myself, podcast that I host by myself. But on Saturdays, 10 a.m. Eastern Time, I do a podcast called Baseball, Beer, and Barbecue with 2 of the roughest, toughest, fill in the blank, co-hosts, and we talk, and it's great because sometimes, and I'm not, I mean, that's what I'm kind of picking up, Dan, from this conversation is we can talk about parenting, we can talk about, our children, we can talk about, some of these products that are pushed towards us, that people are asking us, hey, can you write about this? And then there's the side of me that I talk about the sport that I love. I write about the sport that I love. I spend a lot of time, primarily at Citi Field,
Okay.
as a Mets fan. I'm proud to say that. I guess all the other years I was an apologist up until last year when
Yeah,
things
you got
started.
plenty to be proud of this year.
Right, right, and we tend to we started to go around the country and visit different ballparks and kind of enjoy life, and we talk about it on our baseball podcast, along with talking
Okay.
about food and talking about beers. But it's just that mix of having those two different shows where I can sit and be goofy Saturday
Right.
when I guess Wednesday night I'm sitting here and we're going to have this serious conversation and we're going to talk about Elevator Jones and how it's impacted your life. And, come on. I mean, it's good to let down your hair from time to time and do different things. So I think that's part of the reason why, you blog, you do this, you interact, you network with different folks, because it's just, that's the type of people we are, and it was not a shot at any of the PR people, but I got to tell you, Dan, a lot of times, they push stuff your way saying, hey, can you do X, Y, Z? And you're just like, geez. Let me check out the product first. Let me see if it's
Right.
worthwhile. So I'm not sure if you're going down the route of, being that dad blogger, but I mean, it's interesting. It's interesting, and there's a lot of opportunity.
Yeah, the blog for me, honestly, the Dad's Time Out blog that I have is it's really almost more of a repository of different things that I've written for different places. So, I mean, I certainly post original content there multiple times per week, but it's usually something that's appeared somewhere else. So that website usually just has a lot of links to other places. I've done a couple interviews for the book, so I'll post the link to the book, to that interview or article on the website. Everything, all the sports content and stuff that I write for Splice Today, ends up on Dad's Time Out as a link. And people can get to it through there. So that's really what the blog exists for now. There was a few years ago, 3 years ago actually, I tore my Achilles tendon, and I couldn't drive to work. I live in York and work in Baltimore, so I couldn't drive the 50-mile each way commute with a torn right Achilles. So I was on medical leave for about 11 weeks, and it was either like, well, watch Netflix and go stir crazy, or figure out something productive to do with my time.
Right.
And that's when that's actually when I started the blog. And when I did first start it, I did a lot more like review type things, and I used to post a lot of recipes and stuff like that. And I haven't done that stuff in a while, and I probably should. Just to, diversify the content a little bit. But, life catches up to you, and there's piano lessons and soccer practice and Cub Scouts and book signings and all those kind of things. And it takes away a little bit of time.
Basketball and cheerleading and you name it,
yep.
Volleyball, and you're in the car and you're driving back and forth and that long and windy road, But I think one question I had for you, before we wrap up, the question was about your book. I know you've written several books, and I know this is a series that you're writing. Tell us about. Could you share with us the publishing process? Was it?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay.
So we started writing the book. My son was, when he said I want to write a book, I thought he meant like he wanted to write a story, and we started writing the book. Or started writing the story, and he was like, no, I want this to be a book, like that we can sell to people. And I was like, oh, like that sort of, and in my head I'm thinking, well, that changed a lot of things. We're not just writing a story for ourselves. Now I have to figure out, like, how do I get the story published? Is it good enough? Is it a good enough story to get published? Like, what's this process? So I talked to one of my Splice Today editors who has published a couple of books, and she gave me some pointers and gave me places to find names of literary agents and things like that. And I've sent out probably about 35 query letters. And this was for the first book I wrote, which is called Buckley the Toothless Beaver, which is kind of self-explanatory. But the first story I wrote, I sent out about 35 letters and probably got 10 responses. All of them were positive, like they liked the idea, they liked the story, they liked the character, but nobody was going to publish it. It was, one reason or another. They were a small publishing house. They don't do children's books anymore. Various different things. So I self-published that book through CreateSpace, which is Amazon's, self-publishing platform. And the reason I got to CreateSpace was because I have a friend who's self-published a number of books through Amazon. And these are more like adult romance novel type things. And she gave me a lot of information about CreateSpace and was like, look, this is the simplest thing to do. It doesn't cost you anything out of pocket. There's no minimum books you need to buy. Try it out. So that's what I did. It was remarkably easy to use. I would say the Buckley the Toothless Beaver book, I was able to basically get the book formatted the way I needed to in less than an hour. I ordered a proof copy, and within a week I had a hard copy of the book in my hand. Said, okay, it's good. I logged back into the website, hit approve. It immediately kicks you over to another page where it asks you if you want to make the book available on Kindle. You say yes, and that's pretty much it. The book is then available on Creates.com, on Amazon.com, and available as a Kindle download. So that's how we arrived at the self-publishing process. I knew that I had a book that I had written with an 8-year-old, and I didn't want to spend 3 or 4 years sending query letters out to agents and publishers trying to get the thing published, and publish a book for second graders when he's in 7th grade. That didn't make a lot of sense, wasn't very appealing to me. So, and that wasn't really the point of the project for us. The point of the project was that we were going to work together, we were going to create a story, and we were going to publish the book, and that's what we did. So for anybody that's looking to self-publish, I can't recommend CreateSpace enough, and the Amazon Kindle Direct Publishing program was terrific.
Totally. And I mean this in a productive way. Dan, Amazon is putting people out of business because they're doing it the right way. And, you're not chasing your tail. You're not running around doing this, like you said, sending out letters versus, hey, here's the way to do it. You're going to do it. We could push it through, and there's no issues. So
right, and it's really, and I understand, the Amazon thing can be, controversial to some people, but it depends on what your aim is. What are you trying to accomplish? I'm an IT professional and adjunct professor. That's how I make money. I don't make money from writing children's books. So we wrote a book together because it was a fun project, and we'd like as many people to read it as possible. But for us, the process was the fun part, not. That's right. We don't do it for money. My son just chimed in and said we don't do it for money. So that really wasn't the point for us. The point was that we were writing a story and we were creating something that we could share with people. If your aim is to sell 20,000 copies of your children's story, there are obviously other ways you should probably go. But that, obviously it's not what we were trying to accomplish. We wanted to make a book and share it with people, and make it available as quickly and as cheaply as possible. So that's what we did.
Right. Dan, we're getting ready to close you out. I want to ask you, and this is your opportunity to plug your product, plug your book, plug your various websites that you write for. Best ways to get in. I know you might not be on Twitter and Facebook a lot, but best ways to get in contact with you. And as I mentioned before, tell us about how to purchase the book and all the above.
Yep. So the book is available on Amazon. That's the easiest way to get it. It's available for in hard copy or in Kindle. And the book is called Elevator Jones. It's the story of a second grader named Henry Jones. He lives in the Grand Excelsior Hotel with his parents who work at the hotel. And the hotel has a magical elevator, and it allows Henry and his friend Horatio, the elevator operator, to travel through time, solve problems. And the first book deals with a bullying issue that Henry sort of inadvertently solves through the use of the elevator. And we're working on a follow-up book that hopefully will be available in the next 4 or 5 months. You can follow me on Twitter at Dad's Time Out, and Dad's Time Out is also the name of our website. So if you're looking for the blog, it's dadstimeout.tumblr.com. I also have a Facebook page, so if you're on Facebook, my Facebook page is Dan Soberberg Author, where you can see some updates for some local book signings and things that we have coming up. So,
Dan, thank you so much. I want to give you a round of applause.
Thanks.
And we're definitely going to stay in touch, Dan, because you hit upon one thing that there's several things we have in common besides dad blogging and everything else, talking about our kids and all. But we're both IT professionals. So I definitely
I didn't even know that.
I would definitely want to sit and chat with you because about 18
that sounds
years.
good.
Yeah, definitely. But it was a pleasure to have you on. This is the first time. This won't be the last, because when the next in the series of Elevator Jones comes out, definitely want to have you come through and promote the book and just as you do your books, I want you to be able as your forum. So I want to say thank you once again.
Well, thank you very much. It was a lot of fun. I can't wait to do it again. Thanks for the opportunity.
No problem. Take care. And that was Dan